Welcome to the Wealth Marketing Podcast, where we explore the latest trends, challenges, and opportunities shaping the financial industry today. In each episode, we bring you insightful conversations with industry leaders sharing practical, actionable strategies to help advisors deepen relationships and meet growth goals. I hope you enjoy. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Wealth Marketing Podcast. Today, I am so excited about this conversation. We are going to be talking with Kristin Twiford, who is the VP of Brand and Strategic Partnerships for Nines, where she works with families and private service professionals to streamline their household operations and elevate life at home. She's also an award-winning content producer. She is a brand leader with a background in daily news, education, and technology. But today, we're going to be talking about her work with the Easemakers Podcast. And I'm so excited to have you on the podcast, Kristin. So thank you so much for being here.
I am so glad to be here and to have this conversation with you. I'm really looking forward to it. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, you are probably used to speaking with so many different kinds of people about all kinds of different things. But today, what I want to focus on is your role as a podcast producer. And, I just think it's so interesting because now I'm on the other side. I've been forcing my clients to do podcasting for many, many years. I just launched a podcast and I find it to be not so easy. And so I'm always curious. I love talking to people who have had a successful experience. So first, I would like to open it up to you. I want to hear a little bit about your background because it's a little different than what we're used to hearing and how that led you to Nines. Then we can talk about the podcast.
Sure. Okay, great. So I started out as a TV reporter and I had always wanted to work in TV. I got my first video camera in like the 6th grade and was always producing little talk shows with my friends, and all my friends from childhood are not surprised that this is where I ended up because I had a love for interviewing people from a very young age. I thought I would be a journalist for my whole career, and I hated working in daily news. I really did not like the sort of day-to-day stress and sort of sadness that came with it. Daily news is not very cheerful, and I was always looking to do the stories that air at the end of the newscast. Like, there's these people who count hawks as they fly over the Rockfish Gap, and there's, this unique kind of situation down at the animal shelter. Like, I just wanted to do the happy stories and the feel-good stories. And I was doing a bunch of stories at a school for kids with autism. And I had worked with kids with autism before, and I just loved it. And I said, I wish I could tell these stories all the time. And that turned into, I left news and started telling those stories all the time at that school for kids with autism. And that was a really good fit for me because I was doing the same work, telling stories, creating interesting video content, and writing a lot. But it had a call to action at the end where I could say, this is happening and here's how you could help. And I loved having sort of an answer to some of these stories, even in times where things were sad. Like, it was amazing to be able to say, this is how you can get involved and help solve this problem. But I also had a lot of really joyful stories there. So that lit me up and was the right fit for me. And then years later, I really wanted to move back to New York. And I happened to be on the bus between DC and New York and sat next to somebody who worked at a tech company, and we started chatting. I'm always talking with strangers. This is like my just way of moving through the world. And I had a great conversation with him for the 4 hours between DC and New York. And at the end, he handed me his business card. I was coming here for informational interviews, and he handed me his card and he said, I want to see your resume. Send it to me. And I did. And he wrote me an email that said, we have a job at the tech company that I work for that's going to be writing, video, and education. Are you interested? And in 3 words, that was exactly what I wanted to do. And I interviewed on the very first week. They had just hired somebody to build out their B2B business. It was a tech company that was a B2C platform. They brought in somebody to run their B2B business, and that person was Jaco de Bruin, who's the founder of Nines. And it was just such a clear fit from the beginning. I would be telling the stories of creative people. It was a tech company that was a library for creative files and photos, videos, other kind of creative assets. And all of their clients were photographers for the NFL and sports teams and Major League Baseball and universities and hospital systems and just all of these creative people who worked across, all these really interesting brands. And my role was to tell their stories and educate our audience. And it was just the perfect fit for me. I loved it. And I loved working with Jaco. And so when he founded Nines 6 years ago and they pivoted to become a tech company, he called me and he said, I think you should come help us build this. And it was a no-brainer.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
awesome. And now you're working in the ultra high net worth industry, which I think,
Yes.
it's so funny how things just your path can sort of meander here and there, and you pick
It
up all of
does.
this beautiful experience that leads you to exactly where you need to be. I think that's such a wonderful thing. And
It's
I
so
know you're
true.
so happy at Nines, and I know that what you're doing is like the fulfillment of this whole journey.
It is. And the craziest part, actually, before I was a reporter, right when I graduated from college, I took a job with MTV. Do you remember the show Made, where they made kids into something they wanted to be? And the kids that I was working with, one of them wanted to be a celebrity personal assistant. And so MTV shipped me a camera overnight, and I showed up to work and started shooting an episode of MTV. Followed this kid for 2 months, and he ended up working for David Hasselhoff for a few days. And so I documented that whole process. And there's a recording out there somewhere floating around for MTV's Made, who a kid wanted to be a celebrity personal assistant. So today I work with celebrity personal assistants all the time. And it's really funny that that kind of came full circle.
Totally full circle, and
Yeah.
definitely the coolest background that I've ever
Yeah.
had on any of these podcasts that you started
Thank
with.
you.
Part of your journey was MTV. So that's all you have to say in my opinion. Now you just got the
It's
audience
been a
hooked.
fun ride. I'm very fortunate that I've, done stories on NFL football fields and Major League Baseball stadiums. I did a story at Fenway. I just recently did a story on a yacht for Nines. So it's
Amazing.
been a crazy range. A glacier in Alaska. It's crazy. I feel very fortunate.
You are. You are.
Mhm.
Well, I want to fast forward a little bit. Okay, so now you are running the Easemakers podcast. You have started the Easemaker community. I would love to know, because we work with a lot of professionals to help them to start podcasts. It can often be um, a semi-traumatic journey for them because they're just not used to it, right? Being on a public
Yeah.
platform, doing what they love to do, but it's on a very public platform. So I'd love to hear from you why you decided to start a podcast. What led you to start the podcast? Was it simply a marketing objective, or did you want to just talk to people? Your overall vision. I know probably COVID played a role in all of this. So I would
Yeah.
love to know how you started the podcast and your vision for that, and how that's led you along the journey and the path that you're on now with the podcast and the Easemakers community specifically.
Yeah. So COVID actually played a role in the founding of Nines, where overnight, everybody's lives changed and families needed extra support in their homes. And it was very difficult to find household staff. And Nine started out as a staffing company. And then we pivoted to build the tech platform that all our clients really needed. Um, and in the process of building that, our team interviewed hundreds of estate managers, household managers, other kind of household staff. And there was this clear pattern that everybody felt isolated. Everybody felt like, I'm doing this job. I've never gotten to talk to somebody else about it before. Some of these household managers, they started out as maybe an executive assistant, and their principal said, "Okay, we just IPO'd. I want you to come now run all my homes and my household stuff." And they might be super organized and really high performing, but they've never run a construction project before. And they're just supposed to figure it out. And these private service professionals are amazing. Like they will figure it out. And yet it's very lonely. And I think that we saw that over and over again from everybody that we talked to. And when I first started at Nines, Jaco, and this is funny because I did this with him at the company that we worked for the first time together, where the first thing I did in my new role was just talk to as many of our clients as possible and ask them, what do you want to learn from us? What can we provide to you that you aren't getting anywhere else? And every time in both cases, they said, I just want to know how everybody else is doing this. I want to hear from my peers. I want to understand, how everybody else is handling some of these challenges that I'm handling on a daily basis. And I think you hear that a lot in the family office industry and also in wealth management. It's just everybody wants to know how everybody else is doing things. And some people might hesitate to share because it feels like, we don't want to share our trade secrets with our competitors. But we've found with our Easemakers community, they're desperate to hear from their peers. They really want to connect with other people who understand what they're going through. So when we started building our tech platform, we also started building our Easemakers community, which is an online social network for estate managers and household managers. It's free and it's exclusive to that group. There's no vendors, there's no recruiters, there's no principals. It's just those estate managers and house managers who are dealing with these everyday household operations challenges. And they can log in and say, hey, does anybody have a vendor, a plumber that they like in San Francisco? Or does anybody have a magician for a kid's birthday party in New York next weekend? It's such a range. And I, as we were starting to build that community, met with all of our different Easemakers board members and early members and asked them, what do you want to learn from us? And everybody said, I want to know how my peers are tackling challenges. And I think at first I thought that nobody was going to talk to me in a public forum because it's such a private industry. Yet I had so many estate managers who said, I've been doing this a long time. I really want to give back. And it was clear we needed to be a bit more careful about privacy. So we thought a podcast was probably the right answer. It's something that without video, I think it was the right fit for us just because these estate managers work in people's homes. But, it's a way to share their stories, tackle specific questions around estate management. And we do it usually within a 30-minute window so that people can listen to it in the car on their way to work, or we try to keep it short and concise.
Well, what I love about this whole thing is that you started with what I consider to be the most important step, which is that you asked your target audience what they want to
Yes,
hear and who they want to hear from and how they want to hear and like if they want to hear. And I think that's such an amazing thing, and which probably forms the foundation for the success that you've had.
definitely. And it's funny that you said earlier about hesitating to start a podcast. I did not want to start a podcast. I hated podcasts. I thought, this was not going to be the right fit. And as soon as I started interviewing all these Easemakers, I thought, no, we're going to have to do a podcast. This is the right format. And I
Wow.
think, when I was at a company that worked with photographers, a podcast was not going to be the right fit because it was such a visual medium. And we really wanted to do video content to really show how these photographers worked. But here at Nines, where privacy is so important, a podcast that was audio only really became the obvious fit. And
Okay.
now I like podcasts. I'll have to say, like, I've learned that I don't like certain podcasts, and we can kind of talk about why some podcasts are not as engaging and what I like about some other ones.
Perfect. And so did you start the podcast with like a big vision, or did you just sort of jump in and get started without a clear vision of what you wanted to accomplish and how you wanted this to look?
We had a very clear vision, and
Okay.
I think I would not ever recommend to just jump in. I think and so at Nines we've done 2 podcasts, and in both cases we went in with a very clear outline for the show, like the sort of format, the goal for how it was what we wanted to our audience to get out of each episode, and then how we wanted the sort of tone of the show to feel. I think one of the most important things that we did that made it easier to get started was we recorded a number of episodes before we went live. That makes things so much easier as you're getting started. You do not want to be scrambling and thinking, like, oh no, we need an episode for tomorrow. We had a very clear publishing schedule from the beginning. Um, we had a list of initial guests outlined before we ever started recording. I think we had, I don't know, maybe 4 to 6 episodes recorded before we launched the first one, just because you always want to stay ahead of that publishing schedule.
Totally. And you
Yeah.
guys are publishing every 2 weeks?
Every 2 weeks on Tuesdays. So,
On Tuesdays. So
yeah.
that consistency to me as a podcast host, I mean, that's the hardest part, right? Is like because
Yeah.
I get and I get taken in so many different directions in my different roles in my company. And so I am curious to know, how do you stay so consistent? Because I'm sure you wear many hats also. Because I think that's the biggest challenge, I think, for some of the people we work with also, not just myself,
Yeah.
but, my clients, is that consistency in publishing.
Yes, I think that's a really difficult part of this. For me, I'm in a very fortunate position because this is a core part of my role. It's not a side project. I came into Nines with this focus on our brand, and the podcast is the way that we build our brand and the way that we build trust with our audience. And even at this point, the way that we build partnerships with other service providers, it's a vehicle for the role that I'm in, which is really to build up awareness of our product and our services, and help educate the industry around everything to do with home and managing homes and assets. I think if you put the right structure in place, it becomes a lot easier to stick to a consistent publishing schedule. So for us, we have a very consistent episode format and production schedule. So we start with a 30-minute kickoff call with the guest. We talk about what the core topic of our podcast is going to be. If somebody is, let's say, an insurance provider and they're going to be on our show, we don't want them to talk about all of their services that they provide. That's boring. And they can get that content anywhere else. So we try to figure out what's an interesting topic for estate managers right now. What is something that, if you could talk to a room of estate managers who are managing multiple properties for these really high net worth families, what would you say to them? How would you help them be more prepared, prevent claims before they happen, etc.? So we try to figure out a topic that is more interesting than just a sales pitch for any of our guests. And then the format of the episode is we have them introduce themselves, talk about their business and their background, why they love the work they do. Then we do a short lightning round that's 3 to 5 fun questions to help people get to know them. And we always ask, who's your favorite fictional private service professional? That's one of our,
Noticed that.
yeah.
And
And
yours
then
is Anna from Downton Abbey. I
my,
caught
it
that.
is, that is mine. I love her.
Love her too.
She's the best. She is the best. And so there's a clear structure for every episode, and that makes it so much easier for our team to actually, know what we're getting into every time. We don't have to recreate the wheel for every new interview. It makes it easier on the guests. They know what to expect. And it also makes it easier on the audience. Like, the audience knows what to expect from your show. They don't have to go in and listen to some meandering thing and wonder where this is going. We're very clear. Today's episode is about this particular topic. They know they're going to do the lightning round, and then we're going to get into the heart of that conversation, and the whole thing is going to take 30 minutes. So
Mhm.
everybody's on the same page. And I think for us, the prep work that we do in that kickoff call really makes the episode so much easier. I know what I'm going to ask somebody after that kickoff call, and I have an outline of questions, and we don't always stick to those questions. Mo and I tend to go off script, and we like to listen to the guest and build off of what they're saying and ask follow-up questions. But it is so helpful to have a clear direction.
I love that. And I think that it's so simple, right? Like it's
Yeah.
such a simple thing to do, and yet it makes such a difference. And I don't think that many podcasts do that. I
They
think
don't.
a lot of them don't, right? A lot of them are sort of fly by the seat of your pants.
Yes, and I think that was what I didn't like about podcasts. I felt like I would tune in and I would hear them just kind of, I don't know, just chatting about their weekend, and I would think, what is this podcast even about? And some podcasts are built for entertainment, and if you're listening to two comedians just kind of bounce off of each other, maybe that's entertaining. But if I'm listening to this podcast because I want to learn something, it needs to be tight. And for us, putting structure in place so that every episode was tight and valuable for all of those 30 minutes, it has been sort of the key to our success, I think.
Perfect. Well, I want to get into a little bit more tactical questions. I'm going to
Sure.
fire a lot at you
Yeah.
because I think one of the things when we talk to our clients about starting a podcast, because we do believe that it is the best content medium available today to tell these stories and express your value proposition of what you do as a company in a way that you can't do with website text or a deck. You really are telling stories, so we love podcasting, but I think one of the biggest hesitations I find is this resistance to the time that people have to invest. You mentioned earlier that this is a main part of your job. This is the reason why you're at Nines. I would love to hear how you produce the podcast and some advice that you would have for executives who are considering this as a content medium, knowing they may or may not have the time to do all of these things. And then I want to get into, some of the tactical details like the graphics, the editing, the
Yeah.
posting, all of those things that go into doing a podcast that you're doing. I would love to hear about that. So let's start with how you produce the podcast, and your practical advice for listeners.
The most important thing to start with is, what does your audience actually want to learn from you? So having those conversations up front, talking to your target audience is critical. You should not start a podcast just because you think, let's start a podcast. Like, you should have a clear problem that you're trying to solve. And for us, it was that sense of connection for estate managers. I think over time it's evolved to be sort of educating estate managers on a wide range of family office topics. Um, I think having a North Star audience has been a key part of our show really working well. Um, so, who do you want to reach? That's one of the most important questions that you can ask at the very beginning. Um, and what do they want to learn? So don't just start talking about whatever you want to talk about. You have to be really speaking to them and giving them what they want. I think one of the most important questions that I always ask is, like, what can we give them that they can't get anywhere else? Don't start a podcast that's exactly like somebody else's, because they're already getting that. What can you do that is different and that is, that you are uniquely suited to provide? What can your angle be that is different from something they can get anywhere else? I think those things are more important than any of the sort of like tactical production things. Um, for me, I am not from this industry. I came in as a journalist, and I think I recognized early on the best thing we could do would be to highlight the voices of our community and ask them lots of questions. And so putting them in the spotlight and asking them, what do you want to learn? And then, um, asking them to share their stories, I think is so much more interesting than anything that we could have produced just internally on our own. So that's why our show is an interview format. But think about what format works particularly well for your messaging and your audience. And it doesn't have to be the same, interview format as ours. I think as I was building this, I did so much research. I listened to so many podcasts. I took notes on the things that I didn't like about podcasts and things that I did. I love Acquired. It's my favorite podcast. The hosts are so enthusiastic. They have done their research. They craft every episode into a narrative that makes me want to keep listening. These are 4-hour episodes. It's ridiculous how long these
I've never
episodes
listened
are.
to it.
It's amazing. You should start with the Nike episode. I love that one. But I think there were so many things that I liked about that, and I would take notes there. And then I would listen to other podcasts that I didn't like that were meandering, and I never really knew what the point of the episode was. And I took notes on the things that I didn't like. So do your research, think about who you want to emulate and who what mistakes you don't want to make. And then I think required reading for anyone starting a podcast is Andrew Warner's book. It's called Stop Asking Questions. It's a fascinating read, and I have so many earmarked pages in that book because I think he just offers a lot of advice, and he's done thousands of interviews in his career, and I think he's somebody that everybody should learn from.
Thank you for that. Tell me a little bit about your process for creating all of the different pieces that go into creating a podcast.
Sure. So again, it's very formulaic, and I think that's one of the ways that we've been able to create efficiency with the podcast. So our production schedules, we have the 30-minute kickoff call. We do an hour for the recording. We use Riverside, which I know that you also use, which is like Zoom, but built specifically for podcasts and allows you to have a little bit more control over the audio quality. I edit the podcast in Adobe Audition. There are lots of great AI tools out there now, and there's, editors that you can work with that will just handle it for you. I think I'm in a very fortunate position because I have so much, video editing experience that it's easy enough for us to do this in-house. But I think, for a team that doesn't have that skill set in-house, I would not waste your time editing it yourself. And then we use Buzzsprout to host our podcast. It automatically sends the show out to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, every major podcast platform. We also create an article on our own site about each episode. We have templates for all the graphics, so it's easy to update those and then share those on LinkedIn and inside our Easemakers community. We always get the guest to share as well. I think if you're having people on your show, make sure that they're bought in about sharing their episode as much as you are about having them on.
100%. Mm-hmm.
I think there's so much possibility with what you can do with a podcast because one 30-minute conversation can have so many great insights, and you could cut out little pieces and turn those into quote graphics and have little short video clips, and you could create so much content from just one episode. And I think you just have to decide, how much are you going to do and how much can you do? What do you have the bandwidth for?
And you do. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think there's so many cool AI tools now that can help you create that extra content. And I think a podcast is such a great hero asset that then you can cut down into so many different little pieces. But that's a lot of work. Cutting out those little pieces is time consuming. So you have to think about, what tools are you going to use to make that more efficient, and where are you actually going to invest your time.
Or hire someone to do it for you, which is
Exactly.
an alternative. How has this podcast impacted the growth of Nines and your business?
Yeah, in so many different ways. I think one of the original reasons we wanted to do this was to earn the trust of our Easemakers community and give them a service that they really needed. We build software that estate managers use every day as their working platform. And our Easemakers community is a service that we provide to that core user of our technology. And as a new organization, we really needed them to embrace us, and we wanted to help them, and we wanted to show like we're here to do good. We're not here to, change the industry when we don't have, as outsiders coming in. And we really wanted to show them this is about you and helping you. And so the Easemakers community and the podcast really helped us build trust and that foundation for that Easemakers community. Over the years, we have certainly had people find nines through the Easemakers podcast where they'll listen to an episode and then at some point they'll sign up for our software platform. Um, it wasn't really built for that. It's a nice bonus that happens. But I think the most important part is the awareness that we have built up through the podcast, both in terms of putting estate managers in a place that they have never really been before, sort of on this pedestal with this expertise and being able to share that. But also, it's helped us build partnerships. So, in a lot of ways, we work with a number of different partners, and there's so many interesting service providers across the family office industry, and we want to help highlight their expertise to estate managers and help estate managers learn about all the different resources available to them. And the podcast is really a great first step for us to work with another partner. So we've been able to build really strong relationships with other service providers in the family office industry after that first step of having them on the show.
Absolutely. I always find that the relationships that you build with podcasting they're so meaningful, right? So
Yes.
if there is some kind of business relationship that's open there, the podcast will strengthen that. You're gonna be the first person they think of when it's time to refer. I just think it's such a beautiful thing. In addition to creating the community and reaching out to people and creating that connectivity.
Yes,
So
that's very true.
well done.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been an incredible experience. I'm really grateful that we've been able to build this and that people actually listen. We get great feedback about it. So it's really nice that it means something to people.
It does. I'm curious to know, you mentioned AI. Are you using AI as part of your process at all?
We are, I would say, not enough. While we use AI as sort of a supplementary tool, maybe to help create, here are a bunch of questions. What's a good title for this? How can we create a good SEO title? I think we could be using it more heavily in the actual editing process. And to create more cut down content. I think that's the biggest opportunity for us right now is that we have the podcast. It's a regular drumbeat. We have a really sort of solid engine there. Um, but I think we could be doing more with the content that we have. And so we're looking at even ways to put all of our past episodes and transcripts into an AI environment to really help create educational tools based on all of those expert interviews that we've had over the past 5 years. We're sitting on just so much experience and expertise. So I think we're excited about the possibilities for that.
Same. And you're speaking my language. We're having a lot of
Yeah.
conversations also about AI. Okay. I'm curious to know your most profound lesson that you've learned. What do you wish you had known at the beginning that you know now?
So I was thinking a little bit about this. I think one of the main things that I wish I had known earlier, um, we do that lightning round at the very beginning of our episodes. Sometimes we stump people with those questions and they have this moment of panic, and it's at the very beginning of the episode. It throws them for the rest of the conversation. They'll tell me, at the end, oh, I thought about that question so many times afterward. I kept thinking about it. Or, the next day they'll email me and say, I'm still thinking about that. I can't believe I messed that up. And to me, it's such a throwaway moment. Like I can ask them another question if they don't know the answer to that silly lightning round question. That part of the episode is supposed to be fun and to make them comfortable. And we found that it was actually sometimes making them uncomfortable and throwing them off for the rest of the episode. And so I wish I had earlier on known that. And I think now I always prep people and say, if you don't know the answer to a lightning round question, it's totally fine. We've got more where that came from. This is not live. You can pause, you can think about things. I think it's really important to make your guests feel really comfortable. And I think another thing that has sort of happened naturally over time is that Mohammed Elsmore and I have become more comfortable as hosts. And early on, we kind of stuck to the script and we stayed muted when they were talking, and we would let them, get to the end of their thought without jumping in. And naturally, we have started to just feel more comfortable and chime in and, unmute ourselves so that we can laugh at what they're saying. And I think people don't want to feel like they're talking into the void. So it's uncomfortable to be talking to the silence, and they want to feel like they're talking to you. And so don't shy away from participating in the conversation. I think that was another lesson that we've learned over time that, of course, I wish I had kind of realized that sooner, but that comes with practice.
Practice and experience. That's the
Yeah,
only thing. That's the only thing that
absolutely.
works, honestly.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so most surprising conversation.
So I was thinking about this too. I have a handful. One of them was probably we had Jeff Lambert from LHT Consulting. They do memorial services. That's a really kind of dark topic that nobody really wants to talk about. And he made it so meaningful and sort of touching. So that was a surprising one that I really enjoyed that episode. I think some of the other surprising ones are where you realize, all of these family offices are making the same mistakes. We had Tony Gebley on, who's a cybersecurity expert, and he was talking about how lots of people have these really advanced security programs, and then they have an Apple TV or a Wi-Fi router that's consumer grade and not secure at all, and you're only as secure as your weakest link. And you would be so surprised to see that there's just the same mistakes happening across all these families. Similarly, we had Caroline Cyan on recently from Cadell and Co. She's an art advisor, and she was talking about just how disorganized people are when it comes to their art. And that just never ceases to surprise me that people have art where they just don't necessarily know where it is or how to take care of it. And, when someone passes, it becomes just a really big challenge for the whole family. So that was another surprising one we had recently.
I would imagine. And favorite episode?
Favorite episode is very hard, but I would say the episodes with our Easemakers community members, the estate managers who are actually doing this job, are always my favorite. They call themselves service hearts, and they love to do this work. And I love to hear how people fall into this industry. So they all have sort of different backstories of how they got into private service. One of them, Jean Weiss, she started out she worked in wardrobe for TV shows. So she worked on Parks and Rec. And then because she was super organized with wardrobe, realized that she would also be really organized and could handle the logistics of managing somebody's home and all the assets across their home. We just recently did one with Luciana Nidam, who manages private islands, and it was about the logistics of private
I
islands.
saw that. That is wild, by the way.
Fascinating. Yeah.
And
It
and the
was such a
topic
good
that you
episode.
would never think, like, you don't think that anybody does that, but someone does
Yeah.
that.
She's has a specialty in that. And there's so many cool, very specific specialties. Years ago, we had Chris Ely on, who was a footman to Queen Elizabeth, which is like the most traditional path that you could have into private service. It has very, Downton Abbey type vibes. But really, like, they always surprise me with the stories of how they got into this and what they focus on.
I think we all consider it sort of a bygone era, and yet there are people who are doing this now,
Yeah.
today, and in modern times.
And it's
Okay,
so much more important in some ways in modern times because there's so much to deal with. Like, we have an easemaker who was on the show, Lori Reese, who works with families who are aging in place. And there's so much complexity to, trying to stay in your home and manage, healthcare and all of these different little pieces. They just need somewhere to turn. So it's a really interesting time for private service.
you've created that community for them. That's really beautiful.
It's been really meaningful.
Okay, so what did I not ask you that you wish I had asked you?
I think what has surprised me about the results of our podcast, I think, is an interesting kind of question where I have been really surprised that people listen to old episodes of the podcast every
Yes.
single day.
Yes.
And every episode, like, if you can make your content evergreen, every episode will get listens from now until forever. And I looked at our, most recent episode, and half, the day that we released our most recent episode, half of the listens for that day were for that new episode. And then the other half were spread across 80 plus other episodes. And
Yes.
it's amazing to see people kind of binge listening to episodes and going back into our archive and finding those older interviews. And I think because they've been evergreen episodes, it's really helped create sort of just this well of content. So when somebody finds our podcast, they have years to go back and listen to, and they're grateful to have just sort of this huge range of topics. And it's fun for us to see the stats, like, this episode is still getting listens years later.
Yes. 100%. It's one of the main reasons why I love podcasting so much as a content medium. It is the only medium in my entire career. I've been doing this for more than 20 years.
Yeah.
The only medium I have ever seen people go back and listen to old episodes. And then you'll see, I mean, we look at the analytics all the time for the podcast that we produce. And it's like you have your first metric is like the 2-week listen mark and how many people you have listened. We can expect that to double or triple over time. And people do, they go back and listen to old episodes. It's wild. I've never seen that before in any other content medium. And that's why we get so excited and enthusiastic about podcasting. So
Yeah.
I'm so excited that you mentioned that.
Awesome. Yeah, it's really fun to see.
Now tell me, for people who are listening and who are interested in joining the Easemakers community and interested in listening to the podcast, tell them how they can find you.
Sure. So our website is ninesliving.com. You can find our Easemakers community and our podcast. If you at the top, it'll be under resources. The podcast is on all major podcasting platforms. So you can hear us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen to your favorite shows, as they say. Just search Easemakers Podcast.
Perfect. And of course, it will be in the show notes as well.
Awesome.
So thank you so much, Kristin. I really enjoyed this conversation. It's been so much fun, and I think it's exactly what we needed to hear.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for having me, Rosemary. This was really nice and
Absolutely.
fun to be on the other side of a podcast.
Or maybe hopefully with less work.
Way less work. It was great.